I've created content for over 7 years now, and I've never done a setup tour. It's about time I did one, and honestly, this is the most efficient content creation setup I've ever had the privilege of using. Let's start with the desk that I do everything at, because without it, it wouldn't really amount to anything. It is a basic sit and stand desk from Vivo that I ordered on Amazon at the end of February this year. The biggest thing I appreciate about this desk is the ability for me to continue to push out content for you guys while also taking care of my body. I'm actually working on a habit of standing once an hour, even if it's only for a few minutes. When I'm sitting, I'm on the Secretlab Titan that I've had since 2020, and it's still holding up very well. The armrests are getting kind of worn down, and I've replaced the casters once to maintain it. But now that we've got the comfort stuff out of the way, let's talk about the first half of my setup. In March of 2023, I had started doing some video editing freelance work that was going very well. Later that year, I ended up at a car convention focused entirely on the history of the present-day Nissan Z. Anticipating that coming up, I needed a laptop that would allow me to edit portably and do it reliably, so I ended up picking a MacBook Pro because it was the very best price to performance for the task I was doing at the time. This is my first Mac computer I've ever used, and I gotta tell you, I would never go back to editing on a Windows PC if I could avoid it because of how smooth the Mac is. My particular MacBook Pro is an M1, and it's still chugging right along for me. That aside, I have a basic 24-inch Acer 60Hz refresh rate monitor that allows me to edit more efficiently and comfortably. I do use the MacBook's built-in display as a secondary monitor during my editing times, and it's very beneficial for my posture that it isn't the primary. By focusing on a monitor that is positioned correctly using a desk mount, I am able to ensure that I do not fatigue my neck and upper back by looking down constantly. I use the Logitech MX Master 2S for my mouse on that setup, and it is a solid choice. The biggest selling point for me with this mouse by far is this side scroll wheel that's right here. It just makes things way more muscle memory when it comes to editing. Now for the most fun part of my setup for me to share with you, the gaming, streaming, and recording setup. Starting with the video setup, I use the Sony a6100 with the iconic Sigma 16mm f1.4 lens. This is all captured by Elgato's Camlink 4K. Now I don't use the 4K functionality of this card, but at the time of purchase, it was the only reliable card that would capture 1080-60 that wasn't ridiculously expensive. The camera is held in its position firmly by the Elgato multi-mount system. That said though, cameras are only as good as the lighting you use to illuminate your subject. So I personally use Elgato's Keylight Air to bring out the very best of my camera setup. Honestly, for something this small, I was very pleasantly surprised by the performance.
That's what she said.
That's my joke. Dwight.
To help add a little personality to my background, I have a pair of basic 15-watt floodlights to splash some color on the wall behind me. Moving on from the video setup, let's talk about the part that actually made Iman and Flats both fangirl over my setup. And that's the audio. The microphone is the Electro Voice RE320, and I have it on a basic shock mount and foam pop filter. How did I get them in red, you may ask? Well, I didn't. I bought a $5 can of spray paint at Walmart and custom did it myself. Anyways, that microphone is plugged into Elgato's Wave XLR, and it's by far my favorite audio interface I've used. It is simple, minimal, but incredibly powerful. It comes with Elgato's Wavelink software, and this is a big selling point for me because it allows me to mix my stream and what I hear separately, so I can adjust the volume of things like background music to be normal for you but at a lower volume for me. I can also hear my own microphone feed so that I can tell whether my microphone has any distortions or if it's picking up an immense amount of background noise. Especially with kids running around in my room all the time, which is where my setup is, that is absolutely clutch. To hear everything, I use the SteelSeries Arctis Pro wireless headphones that I also custom painted with that same can of spray paint that I mentioned earlier. The ear cups I ordered online, and they work phenomenally despite technically being for a different model of headphones. Whenever these headphones break, I will probably genuinely cry because there is still only one replacement, which is the newer version of these that fits all of the criteria I need. They are wireless and have hot swappable batteries and can be plugged into a 3.5mm headphone jack to interface with the Elgato Wave XLR. Anyways, let's talk about peripherals now, starting with the staple of my entire setup, which is Elgato's Stream Deck. Man, I'm really starting to sound like an Elgato shill, huh? I promise this isn't sponsored, I just really like their products. I will say that I do have a goal of being sponsored by Elgato as a creator. All that aside, I don't actually use the Stream Deck to its full potential without a doubt. It's more or less an OBS controller for me where I can switch scenes and start-stop recordings with the push of a fixed button. However, as a one-person show, this is the most powerful tool that I have in my entire arsenal to keep things looking good, especially on live streams. Moving on to the mouse and keyboard, which I recently replaced with Corsair options, and I can honestly say I'm so glad I did. The keyboard I got is the Corsair K70 RGB Pro Mini Wireless 60% keyboard. This is not only my first Corsair keyboard, it is also my first 60% keyboard. I'm very impressed with the battery life and the stability of the wireless connectivity. The other half is the Corsair Qatar Elite Wireless Mouse. Quite frankly, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing Qatar, Cater, or however it's supposed to be said properly. I have yet to find a resource on that. This is my first ultralight mouse, and it has been an absolute game changer for my aim in Overwatch 2 as I pursue the OWCS. For my gaming and content setup, I use two separate monitors. The one on the left is rotated to a portrait orientation, and it's where all my chat and alert list shows up, as well as my streaming software, so I can monitor the connection and any issues. My main monitor is actually my father-in-law's old monitor, and it's the Asus VG24V. This is a 24-inch 144 Hz refresh rate curved monitor, and it is by far my favorite monitor I've ever owned. It's also the first that I've used that was beyond the basic high refresh rate monitor, and it is so smooth. All right, now it's time finally for what many of you have probably been waiting for throughout this whole video, the custom PC powering it all. I bought this as a budget pre-built in 2021, and I've slowly upgraded it as I can. Currently, the only thing that is original to that budget build is the computer case itself. For hardware, I have the Ryzen 7 5700X coupled with the Gigabyte NVIDIA GeForce 3080 Ti. This combination is an absolute powerhouse for content creation, even with it being a couple of generations old at this point. To keep that CPU cool, I use Cooler Master's Master Liquid ML240L all-in-one liquid cooler to allow me to do a slight overclock to my CPU, should I need to in the future to use it a little bit longer. I do have 32 gigabytes of RAM, but at this point I couldn't tell you the timings or the speed of it because it's been so long. All of this now shared with the world, I do feel it's important to stress and emphasize the fact that you do not need even a fraction of all of this equipment to create high-level, quality content. However, when you're trying to run content creation like a business, it is important to invest back into your setup. You should also tap the like button for engagement and subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up with all the content I create pursuing the OWCS.